Thanks. So I'll just start off quickly with who am I. I'm an advisor and investor. I'm originally from Canada. I've been in London for just over 12 years. And I've been working with game companies that entire time. These are just some of the companies that I've worked with in the top 8 there as an advisor. And then I'm also an investor in the 4 companies below. This is what I'm going to talk to you about today. You know, the game sector is a great place to invest, so I'll talk more about that. Why you should raise money. You know, how do you know when you're ready to raise money? How much should you raise? What types of investors should you consider, talk to, and how do you actually raise the funding? So where are the VCs putting their money today? Well, most importantly is, you know, they invested over $2 billion last year. And take a note of what's under PC console, 0. They didn't put a penny into PC console business last year. And so 63%, so about over $1.2 billion went into online. The world's changing and VCs recognize that. And that's part of why they're putting so much money into the business. So, wow, that's a lot of money. But how does that actually compare to previous years? Well, this is what it's done since '97. So you can see it was the biggest year ever. You know, there's been $8.4 billion raised since '97, and 25% of that was just last year. So, you know, the game sector is becoming a hot and cool place for investors to consider. But why is a big question. A look on the far right, that's why. That's what you call, you know, more of an American term called the money shot. Over $18 billion of IPOs and exits last year in the game sector. Now, it helps that, you know, most of that came from the Nexon and Zynga IPOs. But, you know, there were still a few $1 billion of other exits. But the business is getting rosy. But, you know, whenever you're talking to investors, you can just tell them, you know, $18 billion in IPOs and exits last year versus $2 billion invested. That's why they're putting money in. So, you know, almost $40 billion in value created since '97, and almost half of that was just last year. So the game sector is big, and VCs like big exits with big returns. And don't forget that word big, because that's what it's all about if you want to raise money. So the game sector is big. You know, there's over $100 billion in market cap, you know, almost $2 billion in money raised, and the $18 billion exits. And the sector's really hot thanks to Zynga. That has opened up people's minds about the game sector, and I think opened up people's mind how fast you can really scale a company. Because you've got to keep in mind, is Zynga only started in 2007, so, you know, in less than 4.5 years, they've created $9.5 billion of value. That is pretty amazing. So in Europe, this has been basically the largest group of IPOs and exits. So the biggest one was Game Cluster, just under $600 million back in 2003 when SoftBank bought them. So the exits have not been as big in Europe, but, you know, they have been great returns. You know, in Playfish, I know one of the seed investors, you know, they made like 45x in 2 years. So, you know, it's not just about size, but it's also about the size of the return. But basically $6 billion in value created. So why do you want to raise money? It's not to buy a Ferrari or anything like that. Don't come up with silly answers when you talk to VCs, because some of them are very serious. These are interesting answers, but they're not going to impress VCs. These are the types of answers you want to give to people when they ask you, so why are you here? Why do you want to raise money? You know, and I've underlined sort of the key words, because, you know, they like to hear these key words, you know, profit, fast, speed. Why do you raise money from them? Because they can bring money and value add. And keep that in mind. Ideally, you want investors who can bring you more than money. And disrupt. They love that word, disrupt. You know, you're going to disrupt the world. But actually, you know, don't just make it up. You know, find a way that you really believe you can do that. and build the best platform. They love the word platform. Not everyone can do that. And to be the biggest. Always think very big. So, this also ties into why you want to raise money. So these are, the top half is good reasons to why you want to raise money. You want to recruit the best people, you want to grow faster with marketing, spending, you want to have more than just one game, and you want to take some risks and not have to keep worrying about what your cash flow was last month. Don't even think about the ones in the bottom half. So the big question is, are you ready to raise money? So everyone thinks, because of Zynga, they can go out and raise lots of money. Well, it's not that simple. It doesn't matter how hot you are. You got to have a great plan, a great strategy. And ideally, you've got something to show besides just a PowerPoint. If you have a rock star team, maybe you can raise money on a PowerPoint, but not too many companies can do that. So, have you got great content? Or have you got a plan for great content? Are you going to have more than one game? Single game companies are not what VCs want to invest in. Financials, are you growing? Are you going to be profitable soon? Are you going to generate lots of cash flow? Management team, is it in place? Have you got them lined up? Are they ready to go? I mean, who are you going to get? Customers, who are your customers? And are you a B2B play? Are you a B2C play? How are you going to get those customers? How many, if you're B2B, how many strategic customers you got lined up? And are you unique? And most importantly, are you scalable? You got to be scalable. You got to be thinking really big. Analytics is absolutely critical these days because that's what it really comes down to. Because keep in mind, VCs are all about statistics and numbers, in addition to thinking big. So, with DAU, MAU, and everything that I've listed there, you've got to know that stuff about your company cold. You've got to know how that compares to benchmarks against your competitors and why you're going to make it better and why you're going to win. So, which types of investors? If you want to raise less than €2 million, talk to seed investors. There's angel investors out there. There's strategic investors, and I'm going to talk more about these. There's government funding, and there's some select VCs to do that. You're going to raise 2 to 10. That's more of an early stage Series A deal. That's predominantly VCs and strategic investors. Anything above that, that's really growth stage Series B or later. It's growth equity VCs, private equity, and strategics. So other considerations. Most importantly, keep focused on growing your company. Raising money is important, but your number one point has to be keep growing your business. Don't lose sight of that. A lot of entrepreneurs mess up their companies because of trying to raise money. And be realistic on how much you're going to raise. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs come to me, complete startup, they've got nothing, they want to raise €5 million. It's not going to happen. And be realistic about how quickly you can grow. I mean, again, startups come to me, think they're going to be €100 million a year business in 3 years, and in 99.9% of the cases, that ain't going to happen. And raise enough to execute your plan. Don't raise more. If you take it on more, you're just diluting yourselves more. Keep in mind that you as an entrepreneur, you want to hold on to as much of the company along the ride. Because it's not about how much money you raise, it's about how big your exit's going to be. And fast-growing and profitable companies sometimes have the option of getting liquidity for current shareholders. That's becoming more of an option because there's just so much VC money out there. So the hotter your company is, the faster your company is growing, the more money you're making, the more realistic this option is. So angel investors, be brave here. I mean, you got to be prepared to, throw your pride out the window and just talk to everybody. Network like crazy, but use the, thanks to the internet, we can find so many things on there. LinkedIn is a great source, but network with people you know. There's lots of angel networks all over the world. I'm sure some of you are familiar with AngelList. It is an amazing, amazing website. There's so many companies that are raising money on there. But keep in mind that, investors, even angel investors, are just as smart VC investors sometimes. So they're going to filter out the best from the crap. And they got C-Camp here in Europe, Y Combinator in the U.S. Those are great ways to just get things going. Government funding. Key point here is look at Finland and look at Quebec. Finland is just doing an amazing job with what the government's doing there in terms of giving out essentially free money, a mix of grants and cheap loans. The startup community there, particularly for games, is extremely hot, and there's some great startups there as a result. Quebec, this has been going on much longer, what they've done predominantly with console companies. I think a lot of governments could learn from what these two regions are doing. But hopefully it will get better in other places. Venture capital firms. These firms are everywhere. Unfortunately, in Europe, there's less than there are in the U.S., and there's less money, and it's more difficult. But if you've got a good enough business, you can raise money from U.S. VCs. But you've got to be thinking probably bigger than you are and be prepared to spend the money to go out there, because they're most likely not going to come here. So these have just been some of the more active VCs. Most VCs have got a game investment of some sort these days. That doesn't mean they know anything about the game sector, but they're always talking about they've got a game investment. Google, I didn't realize it until I put this list together. They've been very active. Intel's been active for many years. Sequoia is becoming more active. Axel has been active for a long time. And It Invest, which is the old AGF fund in Paris, has been very active. I think most of these investments are just in the past 12, 18 months. Private equity, once you get a business, you're generating significant revenues and ideally profits, but you still haven't done something or you want to do something bigger. You want to talk to sort of private equity, growth equity firms, when you're looking to do deals of 10 million euros plus. And these are some of the firms that have done something in the U.S., done something in the game sector. Strategic investors, this is really any firm you think that's going to be able to help you. And this could be anyone from publishers, content IP owners, you name it. Some people don't know, for example, that Jamdat, way back when, gave out stock options to Activision to get some of the games in their library. So when Jamdat had their big exit to EA, Activision was a beneficiary of that. And but someone is going to give you something, but they're not going to give you any money, keep the stock options low. There's no point in giving away much for that. Who? Well, this is probably some of the top ones. There's quite a few, because the game sector is becoming so big now that there's a lot of people that are very interested in it. And they're all over the world. I'd almost say that there's probably more money to access in Asia from strategic investors than probably anywhere. These are basically the top 10 game companies in the world. They make up 70% of the value of all public companies in the world. So these are the biggest ones if you want to talk to strategic investors. Not all of them are going to invest in game companies. Most of them are looking for acquisitions. But you're seeing more of them looking to do investments where they just can't acquire a certain company. So fundraising, how are you going to do it? You got to think about, how are you going to do it on your own? Are you going to get a financial advisor? You're going to need a lawyer. Get a good one who actually knows VC business. How long is it going to take? What's the valuation, terms? You think through this before you go out and raise money, because you're more likely to be successful as opposed to not. If you look to get a financial advisor, get someone who's experienced and done it before. Same with a lawyer. How long is it going to take? I typically tell people 6 months. This is basically the process you go through. Sometimes deals get done quickly. I've seen 60 days. Sometimes I've seen 18, 24 months. It really just depends. It's really unpredictable. As an example, when I helped a company called Unity, I'm sure some of you are familiar with the Unity 3D game engine. From the time that we started to the time we actually signed the term sheet was 12 months, and then it took about another 4 months to actually close it, because part of it, they were moving the company legally to the US for Sequoia. But keep in mind that we started the process just before Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. So that changed things. But we got the deal done. What can mess up along the way? You know, the news becomes public. You know, one of your key team members walks out. You know, your games get delayed. You know, you're just not hitting your plan. And, you know, VCs are saying, you know, why aren't you hitting your plan? Or, you know, another bank like Lehman goes bankrupt. Most importantly, if you get your term sheet signed, don't mess anything up with what you're doing. Don't take any risks. Focus on getting the deal done. I know a company, actually here in Europe, that they signed a term sheet with a top-tier VC in the Silicon Valley. And after that, they messed up with their strategy, user base went down, and I'd say rightly, the VC walked away. That was a huge mistake. So nothing is done until it's closed. You know, this is sort of the content you should consider putting in an executive summary when you're going to go see VCs. It's just really, it's the basics. Remember, you're not writing a book here. You're packaging a great story. Management presentation. Keep in mind, you're going to get 1 hour, and in most cases, no more. So you got to plan about 45 minutes for your presentation, 15 minutes for Q&A. If they like you, they'll extend it. If they don't like you, or they're not sure, then maybe. But take every meeting with a grain of salt, because you know they can absolutely hate it and call you the next day and say they want to learn more. They can be a funny business at sometimes. Financial model. Build it from the bottom up, not top down. I mean, actually build it based on assumptions. Don't say, well, we're going to make 10 million in revenue next year, and then we're going to figure out how we're going to do that. You know, do it the other way, and be reasonable. If you're unrealistic, people just won't believe it. But the key part is how you build that revenue. You know, how do you get your users? What's the whole customer acquisition funnel, and how is that going to flow through in terms of revenues and costs? A Series A term sheet, because this can be different for seed or Series B. Everything's negotiable, but if you get more than one term sheet, then it becomes more negotiable because you have leverage. You know, having the right advisors is going to make a difference. People have been there and done it before. But you know, these are the terms that you have to think about. I'd say most importantly is valuation and how much is being invested. But all these points are important. Due diligence. You know, don't lie. Be transparent. If there's anything that you don't want to tell them, just tell them and get it over with, because they're going to find out anyways. So you better not wasting any time. And people will respect you more for it. Shareholders agreement. This is really just an extension of the term sheet, but sometimes it can be very long, depending on who you're dealing with. You know, it's just, there's a lot of legal stuff, so just get a good lawyer. Closing, once you get the term sheet signed, just push everybody in the whole process until the deal gets done, because otherwise it can just drag out. And after you close, just start executing on the plan that you sold the investors on, and press release, do one, because it's one of the biggest things in your company history. That's my details, and that's where you can find a copy of this presentation if you want it. Any questions?
Is this on? Yeah. You said that investors don't like to invest in single game companies. So how do you see companies like JGAX, CCP, maybe Travian, or even Mojang right now? They all started with just one game.
Absolutely. But there's got to be a vision beyond that single game. You know, there's a lot of large single game companies like CCP and JGAX and Ankama and Travian and several others in Europe. and you know, even Gameforge and BigPoint that have more than one game. But it's not just about the game part. It's all about you got to build your business beyond Europe. You got to go global. I don't know of a single European company that has successfully built a significant business in the U.S. And that is why, you know, you're not seeing the massive exits. So the U.S. is a critical component because that just happens to be where a lot of the acquirers are. So yeah, you got to start with one game, but you got to be thinking way beyond that, and think about, and then look at the, you know, who is big now in Europe and how did they get there? Did they just get lucky with the first game? Because how many of them have been successful with their second or third game?
True.
So, yeah.
What's your view on the multiples right now on later stage or growth capital?
It's going to completely depend on the company and how fast the growth is. You know, people put, you know, automatically want to point the Zynga multiple and say, I want that. That's 23 times last year's EBITDA. No, sorry, nobody in this room is going to get the Zynga multiple. In fact, no one else in the world is going to get the Zynga multiple on a growth equity deal. I would say, realistically, you should be getting, if the growth is there and there are no issues in terms of, you know, your management team's all in place, you know, you're getting traction in all the places, you should be aiming for 15, 16 times EBITDA, ballpark. If you get stuff less than that, then just comes the question, do you want to take it or not? That's something only shareholders can answer. Anything else? Yep.
Hi. I didn't see anything about London Venture Partners in there.
Yeah.
I believe you're involved with them.
Yeah.
And they, if I remember correctly, they've been focusing on Europe and
Yes.
have ideas about investing in the European market. Have you got any comment on that?
Well, we're still investing. We've invested in Supercell and Gray Area, which I noted there, and PlayJam. We're looking at deals for this year. It's something that we have just been investing in our own personal funds because we're also in the midst of raising a fund as well. But you know, we get lots of companies approaching us, but we don't invest in that many. But you know, again, we're looking only for the best. Anything else? Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the session.